I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
Being with Harm makes me so much better than I could be on my own, that it's so worth it. Knowing that she could leave me at any point motivates me to give more to this relationship and to continue to do that.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for listening. Now, as you may know, we recently launched a crowdfunding campaign on patreon.com. And we're getting ready to release some exclusive content there from this very episode. So if you like what we're doing here together, please take a look at the page. It's www.patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. Any support you can give is extremely valuable, so thank you. Now on to the show. Today's episode is part 2 of the Jen and Harmony interview. If you haven't listened to Tuesday's show, you should probably go back and do that first because it will give you some context for what's going on today. Now to recap, in the last episode, Jen and Harmony shared with us how they met, how they came together, and how breaking up ultimately saved their relationship. Today, we turn to the question of marriage. Now these two aren't engaged, but they are committed, and they both plan to be together indefinitely. So whenever I hear that, it raises a question for me, why not marry? But of course, before we can answer that question, we have to ask, well, what is marriage actually? What is this commitment that we're making together when we take these vows, and why do we bother with it? And that answer is different for every couple, of course, and as we've seen on the show, the answer changes throughout the course of marriage for many people. But these two are in the midst of asking and answering and re-asking that question now in a way that they may never be able to again. So I'm excited that we were able to capture their process here, and I think you'll enjoy listening to it as well. So with that, let's go to part 2 of the Jen and Harmony interview. So, all right, now to recap you, during the last interview, you essentially said, wow, we're on different pages with regards to what marriage means and why bother with marriage and what we want out of marriage. And you left a little bit, I won't say despondent exactly, but you definitely left a little bit with a question mark hanging over your heads. And I didn't know where that was going to go. And then you emailed me the next day and said, holy cow, we had the longest conversation last night after the show. And now that's been several months.
Yep.
So I want to know what that conversation was and what has happened since.
Yeah. Well, first I just want to say I've listened to so many episodes of the show now, and I feel like multiple people have commented on how this is like therapy, and it really is. That's how it felt. That's one of the first things we said when we walked out of our interview was, oh my God, that felt like a therapy session. And
it
in
was
the best
amazing.
way. Yeah. And then we just
so
kind of kept the conversation rolling, because it was kind of a moment. We had this moment when we're in this interview talking with you and just kind of realized, I realized that Harmony is excited about getting married someday, and that her picture of what marriage is are very kind of traditional views.
Or were.
Yeah. And I was not on that same page, and we kind of walked out like, whoa. We had this whoa moment of, are we on the same page with this? And, let's talk about this more, because it doesn't really feel like it's sitting right after talking with you.
Because it can be dangerous if you're not on the same page, right? Ultimately, the fear that you must have been experiencing is, well, does this mean that we're not aligned or right for one another?
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, it definitely made me reevaluate what marriage meant to me and us, and what the future of us really meant. And so I kind of walked out of here with a lot of questions. But my initial reaction was positive, like wanting to seek the answers, because I knew that no matter what happened, that we would still be strong, if not stronger as a couple, whatever that meant, which was weird. I don't know why I had such a huge question over my head, but it was so exciting to talk through it with Jen, because I think that always in the past when we've experienced a big challenge or big question, the coolest part is kind of working through it together, and us being on the opposite sides of the spectrum in some arguments, and then figuring out together like how to come gradually together into a compromise or whatever that looks like. It's been really fun in the history of our relationship, and so I just knew that would be the case.
Is that the case every time you have a disagreement? You feel this excitement?
I mean, not all the time.
Not initially.
Not initially. But like once we finally get on a wave, like a good groove or a wavelength where we can see each other's sides, then it's just fascinating trying to put myself in her shoes, and then she will put herself in my shoes, because there's like that mutual respect.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating of like, how can we, with our different views, merge this into like a compromise or a workable situation.
And so you skipped right to that, you're saying, when you went home to talk, you skipped right to that phase?
Right when we walked out the door, we were just like, whoa, that was kind of crazy, but let's talk through this. And we were just like hauling butt home on the 25-minute walk home, just like talking about it already, and it didn't end until late in the night.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what was the conversation? What happened?
Do you remember how it started?
I mean, so I think one of the things about this whole issue of marriage that came up for us was we had never really thought to ask the questions to each other that you'd ask to us. So that was kind of, I think, why it felt like a therapy session, and why, honestly, therapy is probably so valuable to so many people, is because you just don't think to ask these things. You go through a certain question set with your partner when you're in your communication sessions and everything, and they tend to, I think, mainly revolve around the same kind of things, and then you just don't have a third party who can ask you something different.
Yeah.
And so
that space.
I think that was what it was. It was just, wow, we kind of realized like we've never really talked about this in this way. We've talked about marriage, and that we see ourselves being together forever. Or very long term, but like, what is marriage and what does that mean to us? And since we're lesbians, we kind of get to make our own rules. So
awesome.
It was just it was a really great opportunity to do that.
So then what? So then, what you've said so far is that you identified that you weren't on the same page, and then you decided to talk about how you were different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think even through the discussion that we were having when we were being recorded, I said that what I believed, and then it was like, I don't know if I do believe this, and I'm just going to keep kind of trying to backtrack, and does this make sense, does it not? And so I was kind of eating some of my words, or trying to make sense with because I had never really questioned my view of marriage and what that meant to me since I was still living at home in high school with my, high school boyfriend.
Right.
So, and what that meant was like very traditional, you vow to be with each other forever, religious, all
no
that.
sex before marriage.
Yeah. Like
I guess that's out the window.
Shoot.
You said it.
So it was like just a realization. And I always, even after high school and into college, I knew I wanted to be married. And so Jen and I would always talk on the surface of, like 4 months into our relationship, we already used the word marriage because that's what happened. We got real close real fast. But we didn't talk we didn't go into depth what that meant.
So it sounds like what you're all leading up to
I
with
know,
this
we're
is
totally
like all
skirting your question in every way possible.
The preliminaries of, we kept talking about, but what did you...
So I think the reason we haven't dived into what we actually talked about is because it's still not, it's such a complex thing that it's not like we walked away with a, pretty gift with a ribbon on top type of solution.
Think we did. We'll try. We'll try to talk about.
Explain.
Okay, so I initially wanted to reevaluate what my beliefs were in marriage and what that meant to us. And so I think the big discussion was, what is, committing to another person for life? What does that mean? What if it, and Jen, very, rational and realistic, what if it doesn't make sense for us to stay together? Wouldn't we be doing each other more harm than good? And all of that. And talking through it and really, really believing this, if we were to be married and then, 10 years down the road in our marriage, it seemed like being together hurt us individually more than we would love. Like, so my realization was that I'm not committing to, my future spouse for life, because that might not make sense to stay in the marriage for life. But I am making the lifelong promise to love that person for the rest of my life, whatever that means. That was my realization.
Okay. That is a 180 from what you were saying on the show.
Absolutely. But it still isn't aligned with my, deep commitment and loyalty to someone, which was what I thought would be the idea of marrying someone and committing them committing to them in the marriage for the rest of my life.
Okay. Now, I wonder, did you feel like you were giving something up about yourself to come to that new definition or the new perspective?
I don't, honestly, not really, because I've changed so much in the past just 6 years that we've been together that it actually felt more like me, because it honestly doesn't make sense for me now to be with, like, if I was to commit myself to getting married, what if it really didn't make sense? But my fear, I guess my biggest fear with that idea is, the other person, like Jen, not putting in the amount of effort or commitment that is needed to get over the major obstacles that every marriage will throw at you. That was my biggest fear with changing my perspective.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying it was natural for me to change this perspective because I've developed as a person, and this is where I am authentically today.
Yes.
However, my fear about this new perspective is that if I articulate it, my partner might not then put in the effort that she really ought to, or in the perfect relationship world, she really would, in order to make the thing thrive.
Yeah, because my idea of, when I was, a little kid, just thinking of my marriage or my wedding of someone else committing their whole life to me and, whatever that meant. And that was like really, it made me feel really comfortable and validated, right?
Yeah.
So if you change it to this view, it's different. So there's not that same level of comfort of no matter what happens, like we'll definitely stay together. So that, but then again, like that isn't necessarily the healthiest, like you don't really grow without change and adversity and all of that. So I don't know.
I love it. You did come to a new place, but you're still unclear about the ultimate answer.
It's an imperfect science.
It
being
always
in a
has to be.
relationship. Yeah.
Well, so did you guys reach a new kind of commitment to one another through this conversation, or is that still open-ended as well?
So ultimately what we walked away with, kind of tangibles, were when it does come time that we commit ourselves to a marriage, we're going to take a really hard look at the vows that we make to each other and think about them not just by reading a book of what most people do as their vows, but what our vows should be. And I think Harmony articulated really nicely what some of those would look like. And it's not, we didn't nail them down by any means, but I think, they'll revolve around always respecting one another, always showing respect for one another, always loving each other. And, if my biggest fear, unlike Harmony's, is that eventually I will, and this has been a fear not just because of Harmony, but within me, is getting to a place in life where it doesn't make sense to be with the person that you were truly meant to be with 20 years earlier. And I think that happens for people, and I think they stay in marriages where they both could be much happier people being apart or being with other people. And I think there's a way to navigate that while still respecting and loving each other. So I guess what I'm trying to say is committing to that person, but also, if it gets to a point where there's a fundamental difference in the marriage, acknowledging it in a respectful and loving way that where, mutually both people can be better people being in that marriage.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. I mean, you two are struggling with the essence of what nobody can seem to define around their marriage. And I mean, I've married 180 couples now and helped many of them with their vows, and of course been through thousands of divorces, and this essence of when is it okay to leave the marriage is the ultimate. I mean, that's the question that nobody can quite pinpoint. And people have very eloquent ways of saying that they can't pinpoint it, but really nobody can quite get down to what it is. And so the best that I've come up with is people have heartfelt vows that are flexible and adjust with time. And it sounds to me like that's what you're feeling your way towards. You're trying to define where are you today and where would you be in the future. But one of the questions to ask to narrow this down is, what would cause a marriage to end for you?
And for me. Oh,
yeah.
man.
I mean, Jen just said that if the two of you, well, I don't want to paraphrase it, but you basically said if we're not happy with one another, if we're not fulfilling one another,
or helping each other grow as people, I think is the main thing.
Okay.
That's one of Jen and I our main values in the relationship, to continuously push each other to grow as individuals, which in 6 years has also pushed us to be a closer and a stronger couple.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the trajectory that we're at, and we want to maintain that. And if there ever comes a time where I'm pushing her to be, a better person or, grow as an individual, and that ends up kind of making sense where the relationship isn't in line with that, I commit to, loving her for who she is for the rest of my life. And so it wouldn't make sense to be in the marriage. And that would be obviously hard, and you'd have to, put a lot of your ego aside. But if it didn't make sense for the other person, it's not going to make sense for the couple.
You've said this thing a couple times now that I'm really curious about, that I commit to loving you for the rest of my life, no matter what. I'm curious if that's really possible, or if that's just a pie in the sky.
I guess it's a different... Okay, let me rephrase it. Instead of I commit to loving you for the rest of my life, it's I commit to... ensuring in all of the controllable and things I can control, to ensuring that you are still continuing to grow and become the person that you want to be in your own life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if the relationship still is adding color to both of our lives, it makes sense. But if it starts sucking out color from one of the persons in the relationship's life, it might not make sense. But my biggest fear is that there's always going to be a time where color is sucked out from one of the people of the relationship for a period of time. Maybe the other person has to give a lot of the other person. Like last month, I was gone for work for a whole month in Africa, and and Jen really values quality time, and I was not able to give her what she needed in a relationship. But it's like, where is that limit? Where's that time limit? Is it a month? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? Then you can reevaluate.
Yeah.
That's my biggest fear, of that person not putting in enough time where it does really make sense to make that big decision of splitting, a marriage.
But this is making me wonder about something else. So it sounds like you just said in the past your relationship was about Jen because she gave you your identity, in a sense.
Yeah, in college. Yeah.
In college. And now you give yourself your own identity. And so the relationship is about two individuals coming together who are whole and complete unto themselves, which is great because that's not codependent.
Which is the strongest kind of relationship that we've...
Right. But there's this other commitment that I hear in marriage a lot, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this one. it's not only that I am going to support you in becoming the best that you can be, but that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we grow together.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I am all for that. I am all for that. Well said. That really, that definitely hits home. That it just feels right the way that you said that, and for a lot of reasons.
I totally agree. I mean, there's no part of being in a relationship that is all about you or should be all about the other person. It's definitely a healthy balance. But I think it was, at that point in our relationship, a really positive thing to have both of us be able to, grow and be happy in our own skin before we, got back together. So.
And when that might require sacrifice. I mean, of course it will require sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious and a foregone conclusion. But it might require quite large sacrifice. Do you have does that sound scary to you? Do you have a reaction to that? Like, if it were about my career, I wouldn't be willing to. Or do you have any boundaries around that come to mind immediately?
No, because for me, being with Harm makes me so much better than I could be on my own, that it's so worth it. I have no qualms. I have absolutely zero qualms. And in fact, that's probably one of the root reasons why I feel so comfortable about the potential for a divorce one day, because knowing that she could leave me at any point, because that is how much better I think she is than I am, and how much better she makes me, knowing that she could leave me at some point down the road motivates me to give more to this relationship and to continue to do that. I never want to get to a point where I feel like no matter what I do, she has to stay with me because she promised that. And I would think she'd say the same. I mean,
this is kind of like how I see it, because I mean, one of my biggest weaknesses right now is finding a balance, like a work-life balance, because I have the job of my dreams right now. I'm doing everything that I love and I've always wanted to do. So what that really means is it kind of seeps into my personal life. It does seep into my personal life as well. And so being in Africa for a month doing that work and realizing like this is like the most incredible thing I've ever done, there was still that missing piece of, but this would be even cooler if Jen were here. Like we would experience this together, And so it's like, at the end of the day, if I was doing this without Jen, or knowing that Jen wasn't in my life, this would not be nearly as cool. And so realizing that my priority is like, she is the most important important part of my life. And that's how I know that, knowing myself and knowing that it's one of my biggest weaknesses of finding a balance for work, because I'm kind of a workaholic, I have those tendencies, but no matter what, like I would drop it for her in this relationship.
That's really
and
touching.
we would find a balance.
Well, let me ask another question to test the edges of this concept that we're talking
please
about
do.
here.
We like that.
you always do that. Why you gotta be like that?
You love it.
I do.
So you've said that you wouldn't. It's clear that you wouldn't want the other person to have to stay in the relationship just because they said so, if it were painful to them or if it were not fulfilling to them. That doesn't seem like it feels good to either one of you. But it also seems like you're suggesting, you haven't said it yet, that you have a commitment to put a lot of effort in if it looks like it's trending towards that place to bring it back. And I'm wondering, you're nodding yes, right? That makes sense. That you're committing to do the work to make the relationship stay alive if it's starting to go towards an unhealthy direction.
Definitely.
Do you have any sense of how you know if it's gone too far off the rails? Because, I mean, really, that's the commitment. That's one of the main commitments of marriage. Is it looks awful right now, but I promised I was going to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you say, I'm not making that promise anymore. Now it's very abstract, and you guys are very much in love, so it's hard to imagine this. But
Very hard, yeah.
I'm trying to just come up with an analogy or something that we've experienced in the past where, you know, we do get on those edges.
I don't think we've come anywhere close to that. So it is, you know, yeah, it's impossible to know. It's so impossible to know. And where do you draw that line? I mean, I think it's just kind of one of those things where, you know, not being together would be the last resort. I mean, just because we have flexible vows, I like how you phrased that earlier, it doesn't mean we wouldn't value our marriage. And, you know, I think we'd put in as much time and work as we were willing to. And I think there's so many variables in this that it's so hard to know at what point do you give up.
Well, here's another abstract question, but I promise it's related. Is there intrinsic value in marriage itself, separate from the value that you each get, the good feelings that you each get from being married to someone you love?
Say that one more time about the actual idea of marriage.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. So I'm trying to unpack this question of, on one hand, you know, we're going to stay married until we don't like being married anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Could just mean it's only valuable if it makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
Another person might say, we're staying married even if we're completely miserable because marriage itself has so much value independent of our separate needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then a third couple might say something somewhere in the middle of those two things, that marriage has some value, but not if it trumps X personal value.
Mm-hmm. This is hard for me because I feel like if I'm being truly honest with myself, marriage, you know, the difference between marriage and my commitment to someone else is mostly based on societal norms.
Right.
It's based on, you know, my mom being able to say, you know, my daughter's married. It's based, not that there's like no pressure, but, you know,
Like having
the people around us,
like,
it's having the title, it's having a ring on it. So when I go to Vegas, I can like get the boys away. You know, it's like much more convenient to be able to explain to people that this is my wife because like she's the most important thing in my life. And, you know, we have, you know, for all the reasons that,
just
whatever.
To add one thing, and it's also just to give us the title in our relationship where, you know, we never run into the situation where it's like someone introduces me as Jen's girlfriend and societal, you know, society thinks that, oh, just like her girlfriend. It's just like, no, there's no question. If someone says wife, that means spouse, you know, rather than, oh, just her girlfriend.
Right,
Yeah.
which signifies how important the idea of marriage is to culture, to community.
Yeah.
So now the question is, how important is it to you?
I think it is important to me because of those reasons. I think my relationship with Harm, if it was just us on this planet and we could get married or, you know, not, it wouldn't make any difference to me. But because of the culture and society that we live in, it is important to me. And also I've just kind of always thought, you know, like back when I was straight, I always thought I was going to get married. And like, just because I'm a lesbian now, why do I have to not be married? You know, like part of it's also a political statement. Being able to say, you know, yeah, I'm married. Oh, who's your husband? No, it's to a woman. And being able to kind of have that conversation with people, I think is also a part of it. But when it comes to Harmony, and I think also Harmony would like to be married, which makes me want to get married to her to, you know, because that she means a lot to me. And if she wants that, then it's important to me too. But for me personally, you know, marriage, I think I have a unique view compared to a lot of traditional views on marriage. Yeah.
Well, I like how you highlighted the point about community because I think it is true in my view that marriage exists of community. Marriage is an entity that exists solely because of and through and by community. It's like you said, if there's two people on the planet, there's no point for marriage. But because we have large groupings of people, through that medium of people coming together, we've created this concept called marriage, which is a communal concept. And so, but then as an individual, so you've created this concept, this thing called your marriage, which is a separate entity from yourselves, and it exists by and for community. But then you as individuals have to have a personal relationship with that concept as well. And that was what I was trying to understand, how you view it. And so I'm glad you pointed to that. Now to wrap it back around to the question that we came to, that we segued to that from. It seems to me that if you have a personal relationship with this notion of marriage as a separate entity from yourselves and you value it in some way, it gives you another reason to stay in the marriage when you've got those moments where it feels hopeless.
It's just like being on a sports team. It's like you're striving for something that's bigger than yourself, and that's when you achieve the most. And so it's like committing to something bigger than yourselves as a couple.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense.
Yes. And those moments of hopelessness when, you're down in points and it's raining on the field and, and to bring it back home to the marriage relationship, your baby is screaming in the other room and you've got to get up the next morning to go to work for a deadline. Those moments are going to happen. So how do you know when they're hopeless and it's time to give up? I've asked the question already, but now that we've packed this context around it, I want to ask it again.
Go for it.
Also, wrapping it back to the question that you asked, I would say, to me, this would be as hard to answer if you were just talking about our relationship without us being married. So if that answers the question about how much I value marriage, then that's, there you go. I still don't know if I can answer it.
No, you probably can't, frankly.
It's a really good question. I don't know. I got nothing. I really, I hope we never get to that point,
right.
but
it's hard for me to just, I don't know. I'm just a huge optimist, and it's hard for me to think about or even fathom, just putting in so much effort and it just not working.
I think we also, I really genuinely can say I live my life with no regrets. I do not regret a single thing that has happened in my life, a decision I made, anything like that. And I think we're rational people, and we, we've gotten through so much just by talking it out, and and
oh my gosh, yeah.
And like we have so much respect for each other and for the well-being of the other person too. I've told Harmony before, I've told her, if you ever, I don't ever want there to be a reason why you feel like you need to stay with me. I don't ever want you to feel that way. And I, into our marriage, I will continue that. There's absolutely no reason why I would want anyone to be with me if they felt like they didn't want to be, or if they felt like they had to be, or something like that. So, going forward with that mindset, there will definitely be hard times. And I think we both definitely realize that it's something that we can't even conceptualize right now, because we've gone through hard times, but there will be harder. But I think when it gets to that point, it's really just about what's really feeding into this. What can we deduce about, is this rooted deeply in ourselves and who we are? Is it the situation? Is it something someone did? Can it be forgiven? And, is it something that will just take time? We'll have to ask all those questions, and it won't be easy then either, but, we'll get through it. And I think neither of us will regret whatever decision we end up making.
And I don't know, there's this huge trust that I have in our relationship, and Jen specifically, because just last week on vacation, there was this issue that we were discussing in detail. We were both voicing the frustrations that we had for each other individually, and I became frustrated because I really wanted to articulate it well to her, and I couldn't. And she's able to get those conversations started and continuing so that we can work through it together. And so we were one of the things we love walking and hiking and stuff, and that's where we have our most valuable conversations, because that's where we really are able to find the truth and the deep aspects of our relationship that we can work through. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have a lot of trust in when that situation arises, when we are really being challenged, we're on an edge, that we will definitely come together and talk it out, however long that takes, to figuring out what the best decision is for us, because we respect each other so much as people that we wouldn't just walk away or look the other way. There's just no way in hell that would happen.
Yeah. Well, what an upgrade from the last time we talked about this.
Yay. I'm glad you think so.
Oh, for
It means
sure.
a lot.
For sure. You know, I've asked you a question that there's no answer to. Nobody has an answer to this question. People the person that I developed the training course for newly engaged couples with created a diagram for where people fall on the spectrum of when they imagine breaking a marriage. And people place themselves all over the matrix. And then they never align with where they put themselves on the matrix. It's just, it's impossible to imagine a disastrous scenario emotionally when you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
That said, my hope for you, and my hope with asking people this question whenever I do, is to put a trigger in of some kind, so that when those moments happen, a safety word comes out of your mouth, or something does a pattern interrupt and causes you to stop and do what you two already do so naturally, which is to talk about it and work through it instead of just giving up. Well, you guys are just, you two inspire so much happiness around you. Everybody just wants to smile and have excitement and party, and it's just really light and easy to be
Come
around
to our
you
wedding.
guys. That's what I'm gunning for, can't you tell? Get me to the wedding. I'll put a ring on it if you guys. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, you guys. Thanks for coming back. It's so good to see you.
Thanks so much, Eric.
So I like to end shows with a quick game of this or that, and it's pretty easy. I just give you a this or that, and you tell me which one you prefer. So we'll start easy. Chocolate or peanut butter?
Oh, that's literally our
That's the
two
hardest
favorite
question
things.
you could possibly ask
Oh.
of all the questions.
I have that probably every day of our lives. Those two things and a banana.
I know what she's going to say already. Do you want to say it? I say chocolate.
She
I
would
say
be
chocolate.
chocolate. I'm peanut butter.
Yeah.
But you eat them together.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you put them
All
in
day,
a
every day.
banana with a smoothie?
I'm the weird
smoothie
one.
banana?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. My weird thing. What do I do
What?
in the freezer?
Oh, yeah. She likes bananas in the freezer.
Yeah, because then they go in a smoothie.
No, she just gnaws on them.
I just like put on top, and then sometimes peanut butter if I'm feeling like really crazy, and just like gnaw
It's
on it.
crazy.
That's great. My favorite new smoothie is chocolate,
Oh.
banana, peanut butter,
Mm.
and a little bit of protein powder, and then almond extract.
Like almond milk.
Like extract, like the oil that comes in the little tiny
oh,
jar.
snaps. This is new to me.
A little bit of almond extract, a little bit of vanilla extract, some sea salt,
Whoa.
and then whatever
Sounds
kind of milk you want to use.
mind-blowing.
It's genius.
Oh
it is
my
the best.
Gosh.
And
Okay,
it
I need to
totally
get on
fills
this
you too.
extract.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
Great
extract
question.
game.
All right, so we got through that one. Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Batman.
The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
I just like his uniform.
That's-
It's cooler.
Enough said.
Outfit.
Well, maybe I should ask this then. Maybe it's too obvious. Wonder Woman or Batman?
Oh, Jen is gonna be like Wonder Woman. Duh.
Wonder Woman.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Power women.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay, second to last question. Enlightenment or $1 billion?
Enlightenment.
I love the face you're making right now. It's the utter indecision face. Jen.
Do I have to be poor if I choose the Okay, I'll choose enlightenment.
You'll choose
So-
You
sounds
got peer
better.
pressure
We'll always
to do
be
it.
together.
Could you buy enlightenment? Aren't there like podcasts for that? No, podcasts are free.
You're ridiculous.
I'll go enlightenment.
All right, Enlightenment. Last question. If you had to either live forever as an infinity or die in the next 5 minutes, which would it be, Harmony?
I listened to one of your podcasts before, and I've asked a lot of my friends this question, and it's 50-50. It's crazy because I just automatically am like, I'll live forever, no question.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that say.
A lot of people.
What about you, Jen?
Without a doubt, die in the next 5 minutes. Wow. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
What's your reasoning?
I'd rather go out a legend. Just kidding. I think it would be really sad to just watch all my loved ones die and just get really old and shrivelly.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point you just kind of stop learning as much, stop wanting to change much, and also our planet's just kind of going to hell. So I think we're living in a good time here. Stick with that.
Enjoy it and then die.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thanks again for being on the show, you guys.
Well, that's it for the Harmony and Jen week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us on iTunes. And if you'd like to support what we're doing here Together, and if you'd like to get some exclusive content from this interview, please consider making a small donation to help keep us sustainable on our Patreon campaign. You can find that at www.patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. And as always, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is Facebook/Together Show. Our Twitter and Instagram are both at Together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and my one and only is Aubrey Pick. She's in bed. I can't wait to join her. Thanks once again to my guests, Harmony and Jen. Guys, it was love at first sight. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.